Hello, this is Mary Hurdle from Made by Marnie, and I design paper piece patterns. Here's one of my favorite blocks, the rooster. This is a combination block, which means it's made out of segments. This particular block has 3 segments. I paper piece each segment separately and then sew them together. For paper piecing, I need some simple tools. A nice sharp scissors, flat head pins, seam ripper, of course a rotary blade and a cutting mat, and also a ruler with a very easy to read 1/4 inch mark. Today I'm going to show you how to paper piece a segment of this combination block. I would start with my paper pattern, and on my patterns I always show a little picture at the bottom of the pattern as to how you would cut the pieces apart and still get a 1/4 inch seam allowance on all your pieces. And there's a picture of what the finished block could look like. Let's paper piece segment B today. I'm going to look at the numbers 1 through 6. I would start with piece number 1. There's a lowercase letter in each piece. This one is D, and that corresponds to the color yellow. So I will take my first piece of fabric, which is yellow, and I will cut out a chunk that is about a 1/2 inch bigger than shape number 1, and I can tell that it is if I pin it on and I hold it up to the light. The good side of my fabric is facing away from the paper. The wrong side of the fabric is touching the paper. I'm ready to add piece number 2. To do that, I'm going to take a nice chunk of black, which is my next color, and I'm going to turn it so the seam line between 1 and 2 is just bent over slightly, and that will help me position it on my larger piece of fabric. I don't pre-cut my shapes. I never do. I like to trim after, and that's my trick to saving fabric and saving time. So now I will take this to my sewing machine and turn it so that the piece I'm sewing is on the right, and the section I'm not sewing is already on the left. My seam allowance will also be on the right as it goes through my sewing machine. The majority of the rest of my fabric is on the left. That's my mental check to make sure I'm putting my piece in the right place. I'm going to sew on this seam line, and when I sew it, and I've used red thread to show you the sewing a little bit easier, I sew a 1/4 inch beyond that line at the beginning and the end. Then I'm going to flip the piece over, just bend it back, and trim off till there's a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way across there. Then I will flip my piece, flip it, and press it. So I flipped it and I pressed it. Now I have all this excess. Let's trim. If I look at the front again, I can just bend these out of the way and trim off about a 1/2 inch from the edge. The rest of this can be used for another piece of black that I'll need somewhere else. Now I'm going to attach piece 3. So here's piece 2 already pressed and trimmed. Here's piece 3. I line it up by bending it over and putting it along the edge. Leave a nice 1/2 inch seam allowance. Take it to my machine and sew it. The right side, of course, has the seam allowance. The left side does not. There's the excess of fabric on the left. I sew my seam a 1/4 inch longer. I want to make sure my seam setting is at about 1.5 stitches. That would be 15 stitches per inch. So later when I rip my paper, it rips off easily. After I'm done sewing, I flip it back, again trim it to a 1/4 inch, flip the whole thing over, press, and then I'm going to trim off anything beyond piece number 3. So I would cut here and here and use this scrap for another piece. I continue in that manner until I get to my last piece, which is piece 6. Again, I line it up along the edge, sew it, cut the seam, flip it, and then trim off any excess. Then my piece is ready to add to my block. If you would like to see more of my fun patterns, like the rooster and the chicken, you could go to Made by Marnie on Facebook, and I'll see you there. Bye.